Breathe a sigh of relief, Mountaineer Nation. The West Virginia Mountaineers, this is rare to say, are the luckiest team in America on this night, or at least one of the luckiest teams in America on this night. WVU escapes Waco with a win, their eighth of the season, the turnaround year, well above expectations and predictions, certainly nationally. Does continue on to a bowl game, but the regular season goes 8-4, and they do it in a very bizarre, insane manner that should not have been nearly as difficult as it was. And as I already put out there on social media, there was no excuses for any of this, but maybe I jumped the gun because they do get the win. And I saw my colleague Ethan Bach actually refer to it this way, and I think this is the simplest way to explain this game for anyone who did not watch at all. This win over Baylor for West Virginia is how the Houston game went down, but a win for the Mountaineers. It's kind of how Houston maybe should have went down, even if you have to have it be as chaotic as it was. West Virginia played god-awful in the second half. Yeah, the two kickoff returns are inexcusable and absolutely suck, and based on the points and mathematics, they're part of this. But if West Virginia played a little bit better or even okay in the second half, it probably wouldn't have ended up being this close. And they played bad defensively. The offense couldn't get going. What worked in the first half with the defense being aggressive and the offense moving up and down the field with ease didn't happen in the second half. But Garrett Green, Hudson Clement, and Jaheim White, and it almost looked like Garrett Green and Hudson Clement, maybe we're going to have a repeat of Houston, where, of course, Clement got what thought to be the game winner in that game, and then Hail Mary ruined it and got Dana and Houston a win, really the last moment that was positive for the Houston Cougars this year. Jaheim White ends up getting in the end zone and joining the party, the freshman sensation, who had a great first half again, scored that first touchdown, so a big part of this game. But again, the second half, Green, White, nobody in and out of the lineup, nobody could get going, and health was part of that. But even Zach Frazier getting hurt at the end, it wasn't good for the Mountaineers, for Neil Brown, for anyone. A loss would have been disaster. That's why my game recap, which of course is at WV Sports Now, literally read WVU escapes disaster, and they did. And again, I'm Mike Asti here. This is our WVU post-game show, and West Virginia beats Baylor 34-31, if I didn't tell you. But you already know all that at this point if you're watching this, and you're just trying to let it sink in on what you just watched. But if you are a member of Mountaineer Nation, you can go to bed happy. You can sing Country Roads. The program did climb to 8 wins, no matter whether you want to believe in it or not. Way big of a turnaround from 5-7. And the Houston loss is really the only bad loss on the resume. Oklahoma State, of course, playing for a conference title. Oklahoma, a top 15 team most of the season. Texas, likely going to be the Big 12 champion. Top 10, top 15, pretty much all year long. Lose to Penn State, top 15. They were even top 10 a lot of the year, but top 15 right now. Those aren't bad losses. Houston, a really, really bad loss, and Dana on the hot seat right now. That should have been a win. And this would have been just as bad or even worse. I mean, Baylor had nothing to play for. They had a backup QB in. They're not bowl eligible. Their fans who were there brought it. The student body cared. It was senior night, but it's not even a great era of Baylor football right now. And yeah, they did win the conference a couple years ago, but not these last 2 years. That hasn't been good. So what are you sending them out on in terms of a note? But I guess thanking them for 2 years ago. But it would have been really, really bad because, yeah, you still have a bowl game, and 7-5 versus 8-4 with bowl tie-ins. It really wouldn't make a difference probably whether you're in the Pop-Tarts Bowl, the Alamo Bowl, Guaranteed Rate Bowl, or the Liberty Bowl, or Independence Bowl. I mean, they're all mediocre bowl games. Some do have more history than others and might mean a little bit more to win. But even those, the names of them are funky, like the Pop-Tarts Bowl. What the hell was that in terms of history? You have oranges, you have literal oranges that you replenish in the Orange Bowl trophy at the facility. That looks nice. That's an historic trophy. That means something. You're going to throw Pop-Tarts in there. You're going to pop a Pop-Tart every now and then and throw it in the trophy. Come on. So it wouldn't have mattered that much, but it would have been a big deal covering this team, knowing the fan base. I'm sure you guys can agree. It would have been a major big deal on how the weeks prior to the bowl game are, and certainly the offseason. Forget recruiting, forget the portal, and all of that was better this past year. 100%. Beanie Bishop, a great transfer ad, part of the winning. Recruiting class top 40, that's all part of it. The freshman, Gallagher, Traylon Ray, Jaheim White, big part of the winning this year. All that way better this past year, and it's been proven, than it was the year before. None of that would have mattered if you lost this game. Even if you win the bowl game and get to 8 total, this would have left a really sour taste in people's mouth. They would keep on talking about the schedule. This would be a second bad loss instead of just one. One, you can say Hail Mary, even though you played bad all the way through. 2 in the same style with 2 kickoff returns and sucking in the second half. That would have been inexcusable. That would have, again, I think, honestly felt worse than the Houston game did, because at least that was Dana. You knew he was going to throw it pretty much every time. It was a PI or a catch. This was just 2 kickoff returns. Shouldn't allow 1, but you allow 2 back to back. I mean, that mathematically would decide the game. And then you just played so bad in the second half, it would have felt even worse maybe than Houston. Losing it this way, losing it that way. Either way, they both would have been bad. But no one would have cared about recruiting. No one would have cared about the portal. Everyone would have wanted Brown gone, and many fans still want Brown gone. And you can point to this game as a bad result, even though they did win. And I do think last year's team wouldn't have won this game. And I said that a few different times this year. So they're definitely better than last year, regardless of the schedule. A little easier this year than last year, but they're taking advantage of it. And a lot of teams around the country taking advantage of weak schedules. They didn't play Texas this year. I'm sure it would have been a loss if they played them, but they did play Penn State. And not many Big 12 teams, not many Power 5 teams really play opponents that good in out-of-conference play. There are some. Texas obviously did, playing Bama. You can point to a couple others, Texas Tech being one of them in the conference, and they're no better. They're a similar program maybe than the Mountaineers, so they also did. But most do not. TCU did not last year when they got to the playoff. So you don't have to. West Virginia did. And yeah, Pitt sucks, but Penn State obviously very, very good. So again, the Mountaineers got the win, though, and I'm more than willing to have any of you chat along. Usually you do on these post-game shows. Again, my game recap at WVSN. We have a Twitter reaction that I just saw go up there on the site. I will get video reaction, all of that up here on the channel and the site when it comes to me. Obviously not in Waco, and can you imagine what that flight would be back to Morgantown if this was a loss for West Virginia? Now that it's a win, you can breathe a sigh of relief a little bit and probably make fun of yourself and maybe watch some SNL or whatever you want to watch to kind of make this comedic. And then you go on to weeks of practice. You can celebrate a win. You do have an 8-win season. You go into a bowl that is at least respectable. And they've been favored in most of the predicted matchups, by the way. They certainly could win that game. They may not. But you would figure, and Zach Frazier got banged up in this at the end, limping out of the game, that Frazier's probably the only player that won't play in that game looking at the NFL draft. He might play because he loves West Virginia, but if he doesn't, I'm not going to hate on him. But a lot of the integral players, Green, Jaheim White, again, youth on this team all the way through, they're going to play. So Hudson Clement, I'm sure, is going to want to play. He wasn't even a scholarship player to start the year. That'll be a positive. Maybe Beanie won't, but is he really an NFL guy? Aubie Burks, again, another one. Got injured, had to come back from injury, was stretchered off, played well this year after only becoming a starter at the beginning of last season, a big integral force this season on and off the field, and an emotional leader for this team. Even he's done a lot more than even the numbers show, and again, was carted off against TCU, so he didn't really get back to 100% until a couple weeks ago. But for the most part, they may have the full crew, more than most teams playing in average bowl games. So that could be a benefit to try to go ahead and win it. See, a lot of you here watching along, and I appreciate the click there to watch it. Feel free to chat along. Feel free to join me. Otherwise, I will make this one of the rare short shows, whether it be post-game or otherwise for myself. I'm not known for short broadcasts and short commentary. I'll make fun of myself there. But if nobody does join me and chat along, then that will be the case because, again, I think everybody, maybe you just need to kind of recuperate and wipe sweat off your brow after watching that one. West Virginia wins at 34-31 if you're just tuning in. And if you're just tuning in and you missed the game, not sure why you're watching this, but did you miss a lot? Again, West Virginia looked like they were taking them to the woodshed all through the first half. It looked like it was going to be a blowout. It looked like it was going to be all Mountaineers. It looked like the BYU, the Cincinnati game, how it should look, okay? How it should look. I hesitated kind of writing it that way, that this was a locked-up win, because that's just never the case in the Neil Brown era, really, and we all know that. But it was a backup QB. Shapen, if he was there, I could maybe see this type of situation. He's been good this year despite them not winning, and they're unlucky and they're bad and they're snake bitten. Like, you see why Baylor sucks and it's a 3-win season? They blew this. They should have won this in the second half. People talking about Baylor having better players. They have better players than their record shows. I don't know if they have better players than West Virginia, but this is the problem. But West Virginia wins at 34-31. And if we were talking right now on this being a loss, this would be a whole different conversation. I'm sure you guys would be lighting up this lamp with chat activity. A lot more action here off losses, let's face it. And I get it. And social media would be scorched earth, and everyone would want Brown gone, and no one would care about any climb or any record, and it wouldn't even be much of a conversation. And I put it up there, no excuses. There would be none. There would be none, because even with the kickoffs, and there's no excuses for those, certainly not two of them back-to-back. That's historic. My man John Antonic with the comms department at WVU knows more about history of the program than anybody. Him and I go back and forth. We don't always agree, but in terms of knowledge of history, no one knows more. Had him on shows back when I was at the Trib years ago, known him for a while. He put it out there. I'm going to trust him. 1904 against Michigan, the winningest program all time, and West Virginia is the 15th, so it's not like it's trash. Quality program. Michigan, obviously, the cream of the crop historically. And since 1904, the last time. Only's happened twice. That's the only other time. 1904 against Michigan, losing 132-0, I believe was the score. And by the way, for anyone confused, back then you would score, kick it off, and then you get the ball back. That was the weird rules at that point. So that's how you got two of those, even though it was 132-0 without West Virginia scoring. But Michigan was the opponent back in 1904, a year after the first World Series, for crying out loud. Okay. We're looking at almost 20 years before the 1922 season, where West Virginia went undefeated with a tie, and some argue should claim a national title. They were one of many teams to go undefeated, but they're the only 10-win undefeated team that also won a bowl game that year. 20 years before that was when this occurred. And only twice in program history, 100-plus years of the Mountaineers, have they allowed two kickoff returns in the same game. 2023 to end this season against Baylor, which was a win, 34-31, and then 1904 to lose to Michigan in a ridiculous 130-plus-0 score. This team totally surprised me this year. Zach, yeah, they did. I mean, well, to be fair, I said 6-6 going into the season. I thought this team would crawl into a bowl game. I thought this was going to be a back-and-forth roller coaster ride. So they did surprise me. I'm not as blown away as some of my national media colleagues out there. Some thinking this team would win 3 games, 4 games. The over-under nationally was 4.5 on most sports books. No, I did not buy into that, and mostly because of what Neil Brown did honestly say at Big 12 Media Day. And I predicted them to be, I think, second or third to last, not last. I think I had Houston last. So it wasn't like I thought this team would be that great, even though I thought they could crawl to 6-6. I thought the conference shakeup would be a little different, even though I thought Texas would, of course, end up winning it. But I thought they would crawl into a bowl. I thought they would be Pitt, honestly. I thought Pitt was overrated. I thought they could be TCU. I wasn't sure on it. I thought they could be TCU for sure. I thought Texas Tech would be a similar situation. I thought they probably would win that game. I thought they would lose to Houston, honestly. And I thought kind of the end of the year kind of would slide opposite the way it did. They had that bad loss, of course, to Oklahoma, but they've now won most of these end-of-season games in this final month besides the Sooners, winning 3 out of 4, winning comfortably against BYU at home, killing Cincinnati at home, and then this one on the road. So 3 out of 4, despite that bad loss to Oklahoma. I, at the time, probably would have had, I don't remember exactly, probably would have had BYU maybe being an up and down game. They actually were good back in the day, and they did have a tough schedule, unlike some other group of 5. So I thought their transition would be better than it's been, even though they're a bowl team. I'm sure I had Cincinnati as a win. Oklahoma State I probably had as a loss, even a worse loss than it ended up being. But West Virginia arguably should have won that game and blew it at the end. So I had 6-6. I'll go through it at some point to kind of reflect back on what I said, but 6-6 I did have. They're better than that. They're 8-4. They're in a quality bowl game. They're going to get in a quality bowl game. 119 years. Seems like yesterday. Yeah, man. 1904, last time. 2 kick returns allowed. Got killed by Michigan. And then it happens this year. Only twice in program history has that happened. That's insane. I would never put money down that was going to occur in this game, whether I knew that stat or not. So, again, West Virginia does go 8-4. They do get it in a quality bowl game. They do finish top 5 in the conference after being picked to finish last, which, again, the offensive line mostly coming back with all their experience, the quality running game they had. I did think CJ would have a big year. He had an okay year. He had 3 games in a row. I got heat, but he was struggling in those games. He's also been banged up at times. He's been really good at times too, but at the end of the year, Jaheim White maybe has emerged as the future of the Mountaineer backfield for sure. He might be the next star running back for West Virginia. He's from the 2023 freshman class and was kind of overshadowed by Rodney Gallagher, even Traylon Ray. But Jaheim White might be that diamond in that class. Ray obviously had a great year at the end too. Gallagher has been okay at times and kind of, I like his family. I like him. I got to be honest. He's been okay at times. He's shown flashes of athleticism and of brilliance. Has not been able to be utilized as much as even Ray. Certainly not Jaheim White, and White obviously a running back, Gallagher playing wide receiver. But Gallagher is switching positions, mostly. Played receiver in the past, but mostly a quarterback in high school. That's a transition. And separately from that, he's a great athlete, but he needs to get a little bigger. And Brown's been talking about this. Needs to get bigger, needs to get more muscular, needs to build his body a little bit. I think he could really turn it on and have a great year next year. If he stays, and I'd imagine he would, from talking to who I've talked to. Certainly he likes Brown. He has NIL deals. The program now is better than where it was. I think he likes the crew, likes Green, likes White. Him and White are really close. Even Traylon Ray as well. I would guess right now he's going to stay. Obviously, Penn State was that other team that he dangled with prior to fully committing and signing with West Virginia. And obviously, they're even a better team. But how much would he be utilized there, even though they do need wide receivers? So I think he's in a perfect situation for what he does as an athlete, with a lot of swing passes, etc. He's more of a Big 12 player. I'll say this, and his father's been public with this. His father flat out told me this. He's more of a Big 12 player in the style than a Big 10 player. So that, I think, is part of why he will stay and why he did end up at West Virginia, also liking Brown. So, but Jaheim White's right now the diamond of the class. Jaheim White is right now the star of the class. There's no denying it. No denying it. A Asti game against Cincinnati. Big 12 freshman newcomer of the week. Sean Alexander, former NFL MVP, called him freshman of the week. Big game against BYU as well. Does what he did in this game, and obviously the big touchdown early and then the big touchdown late. So, Jaheim White's a star in the making and now. And now. The future is now for the 2023 class. That could be the class that turns this around and maybe saves Brown's job and allows a new era of Mountaineer football to pop. I'm not going to in any way say that it's the Pat White, Steve Slaton class or that he's Steve Slaton, but he did things that Steve Slaton has done that haven't been done since him in individual games to this point. So, again, Jaheim White, a great season, certainly at the end. They had to put a lot of scotch tape on the defense, certainly the linebacker crew, certainly Ben Cutter and company with all the injuries. Lee Copa played well, became a leader, aggressive for sure, but the defense was a roller coaster ride this year. They will admit that, and it's just a fact. Eddie V and company, Sean Martin, they had to step up at times, but they also had some real rough games. The D-line has not always been what maybe some thought it would be, even with Dante Stills in the NFL from last year. So the secondary, too, that's been up and down. Beanie Bishop, great ball hawk, getting his hands on the football. Even Floyd as well in this game. It almost was a pick six in this game. They lead the country in ball hawk rate. And I've written about this. Neil Brown's talked about this. It's not really a positive stat because while they're getting some picks and Beanie Bishop has some interceptions, I believe 4 or 5 this year. He's in the top, 3, 4, 5 players at his position at that. He also squandered 3, 4, or 5 other ones. The defense has missed tons of picks and turnovers. And if you're going to lead in ball hawk rate, which means being aggressive, getting your hand on the ball, etc., it's kind of obvious, you got to create more turnovers. So they're right up there in ball hawk rate. At the time, it was 20+% on individual plays. So they would get their hand on the football. That's crazy on pass plays. But to not turn that around and have a better turnover rate, shows you they're missing turnovers, and who knows if that would have made a difference against Houston in particular, even at the end against Oklahoma State. Probably not against Oklahoma or Penn State, but that's 2 more wins. That would have been a freaking 10-win year. So 8-4 is good for the West Virginia Mountaineer program in any year off any schedule. It's really good for most programs out there. Certainly, it would not be good for Alabama. Certainly, would not be good for Georgia. Penn State, they're unhappy with 10. They're unhappy with a 10-win season. So obviously, an 8-win season they wouldn't like. But 8 wins is very good for the West Virginia program. 100%. It is. If you look at the history of the program, I think there's like 8 10-win seasons. So to get 8 wins, most wins Brown's had in a single year. He won a bowl game in the Liberty Bowl, but it was the COVID-shortened year. This is by far his best season as head coach of the Mountaineers. Win or lose the bowl, even if you lose the bowl, this is the best season. Okay, you win the Liberty Bowl, but that was a COVID-shortened year. They didn't play Oklahoma. They would have lost them that year, of course. That was a great Oklahoma year for them. This is the best season for Neil Brown as head coach of the Mountaineers. And yeah, it would have sucked to lose. Big capital letters and sucked. It would have sucked to lose, Marlene, 100%. For Mountaineer Nation, I'm not sure how they would have been able to get over that loss, to be honest. And yeah, there always are some negative fans. I've complained about this. I think there are a lot of West Virginia fans that look for the negative before they look for the positive, because it's hard to complain about 8-4 season, even though, yeah, there's a couple bad losses, or at least one bad loss. You could argue Oklahoma State at the end. And then the schedule was easier this year than last year. But again, 8-4 is hard to be that mad. 8-4 is a good year, and I'll break this news. They're not going to fire Neil Brown off an 8-4 season. They're not. Yeah, Jeff, I believe Jaheim White was right up there. I'd have to double check, but in terms of yards per catch, certainly as a rookie, I think he is right up there. I'd have to double check on that again as we're doing this show live, but I think he is right up there. I think he was leading coming into this. Don't know where the numbers lie after this weekend, but there's no way they're firing Neil Brown off 8-4. He could easily be sick of the polarizing effect and how some fans are unhappy with pretty much nothing he does, even if he wins. That is possible. I don't see who's going to hire him. Obviously, Texas A&M, it's a random rumor that's out there that is not legit from anything I've heard. Okay, Michigan State's already made a hire. Oregon State's out there now looking for a job, looking for a head coach, but that's not a better job by no means. That is a worse job. I would not leave West Virginia for that job. West Virginia's stable in the Big 12. It's a better historic program. The NIL money is better. Even recruiting's better, even though it's rough in West Virginia. You got much more around you in PA and Ohio and going down south. They've done well. This is year 5. They're building something. Kentucky could be open, and that's more of a Neil Brown connection, obviously. Coach there, being from there, that is a Neil Brown connection. I will say, if he wants to, go be my guest. This will be looked upon as a positive climbing year nationally for him as a head coach, and he was a great hire at the time of being hired. At least that's how it was viewed around the country in 2019. It has not been good enough at WVU at all. This is a better year. This is a step in the right direction. But going to the SEC with Kentucky playing football and not playing basketball will be really, really tough. And if he thinks the Big 12 schedule is rough or even out of conference is rough, putting Penn State on there, it doesn't matter what you do out of conference. You're going to have 3 or 4, if not 5, ranked teams on your schedule every year in the SEC. So I think that's a worse job, and he will never win there big. Arguably won't even have an 8-win season like he's had at West Virginia. I wouldn't recommend it if I was advising him, just on himself. We'll see if he's sick of the fan base enough to jump there or if they would want him, but that's something maybe to keep note of. I can't see it happening. I think he likes the situation. I think he likes the freshman class he has there now. I think he wants to build on Jaheim White, Traylon Ray, and Rodney Gallagher. I would be scared Gallagher and some of those guys would leave if Brown's gone, by the way, if you're a fan and you like that class. They love Brown. So there are a lot of fans that want Brown fired. But if he would leave or he would somehow get fired, and again, he's not going to get fired off an 8-4 season, win or lose the bowl. Certainly not off a 9-win season. They may leave. They love some Neil Brown. For whatever reason, he's selling them something. So I think Neil Brown is a straw that stirs the drink to keep this class together if it's going to stay together. But yeah, if they would have lost this Baylor game, it would have been really, really bad, and defending him would have been almost freaking impossible. And I've never thought they would fire him off even a 7-win season off turning around from last year. I publicly said that. I thought once they got to 7, they were locking in with him. Even if you lose the last 2, including the bowl, he would stay. But, man, it looked like the team almost quit in the second half. You have the kickoff returns. You play so bad in the second half. It's against Baylor. Even though you're on the road, they're so bad. Yeah, I think that might have been just cause. I was getting ready to potentially write. We got to let loose on Neil Brown right now. Maybe you do pull the trigger and fire him, despite everything I've said about building, about improving, about the freshman class. But they did win. West Virginia did win. They won 34-31 in Waco. What a bizarre game, and that's why Baylor has 3 wins. Man, almost got to feel bad for them and the fans that are there. 3-9. West Virginia, though, ends up with the win at 8-4. They will get an equality bowl game, and we'll see what happens in that game. A lot of youth, and obviously Garrett Green can come back. He still also played off his game at times. Love to hear some takes on him. Again, look at what Kentucky's done, though. I don't know. And that's interesting that was brought up, and that has not really been discussed that much. I don't think Neil Brown is looking for a way out. I think he likes what's going on there, and he thinks next year can be better, to be completely honest. You lose Zach Frazier. You do lose some players, maybe Doug Nestor. For the most part, this team is very, very young, and for the most part, is going to come back next year. Okay? Penn State will still be on the schedule, but they're going to be in Morgantown. Pitt will be in Pittsburgh, but Pitt is reeling, and they're off the worst season they've had in 30-plus years. Their quarterback, if they keep Garnell, is going to have less experience than Green. You're now going to have the more experienced QB. You don't have Texas on the schedule, obviously. They're leaving the conference. You won't have Oklahoma on the schedule, obviously. That's pretty much been a loss every season except for 2022. So that'll be gone. That'll be off the schedule, too. You have the new Big 12, and you're the winningest historic program in the new Big 12. Does not mean you're going to clip off conference titles. I think Utah might be the class of the conference moving forward. But there's still winnable games on that schedule. There's a winnable path to 7-8 wins again. Honestly, looking at that schedule. Do you have an update on Zach's injury yet? I would check in at WVSN or Ethan Bach. He's trying to follow that while I'm on this show. Obviously, Neil Brown's probably talking about that right now, so I would honestly even recommend maybe trying to find his press conference as I'm currently speaking. I'm obviously not there at the press conference or at the stadium. They are not offering it on Zoom right now, so it is just if you are there, so I was able to do this. So I don't have that personally here on this show, but it could potentially be in our site on any of our social medias. Maybe Ethan tweeting it. Maybe it's on WVSN social. And I'm sure Neil Brown's getting asked about it and talking about it from who is there. What do I think of Nico? Well, Zach, I mean, I got to be honest with you. Garrett Green has had his rough moments where you wince and say he's trying to do too much. 100%. Sometimes he doesn't play smart. Sometimes he tries to do too much. It almost lost them this game against Baylor. It certainly cost them in the Houston game. It definitely was there against Oklahoma as he really, really played bad in that game, and he'll admit it with you. Overall, though, he's been way better than anybody probably would have thought in their heart of hearts. It doesn't mean he should have started 2 years ago. He wasn't ready then, even though it obviously went bad at the end with Daggy and certainly wasn't great with JT at the end either. But from emerging last year is really just using his legs against Oklahoma and having that big win. But again, a lot on the ground. He's still a true athlete. He's got better as a thrower this year. He's even become more of a leader, more of an athlete. He is that dual threat QB that West Virginia fans love and Neil Brown loves having. Look at his recruiting. He even said this last week to us at his weekly presser. He's now diving into really having dual threat QBs. There have been great quarterbacks, Hofstadter, Geno Smith, Mark Bolger. They're not, Geno runs a little bit, but they're not true dual threats, and they had success at West Virginia. However, Neil Brown's head first in the dual threat QB now. So Garrett Green fits that mold, and this team loves playing for him. They love playing with him. He's a true leader of this team. You talk to anybody, and Garrett Green is the guy they would run through a brick wall for. So he is not perfect at all, but a full seasoning now of knowing he's the starter. He will not be in a competition, I would not imagine, in the offseason. He does have the eligibility back. Garrett Green's coming back next year and going to start week 1. Book it. So if you're Nico, who did play okay at times, he did get them the Texas Tech win. He certainly played well enough to win at Pitt, even though he had turnovers, and that was just chaotic. You could argue they took advantage of Pitt having Jerkovic in there and making mistakes, but he did enough to win those games. But he's clearly not close to Garrett Green. The offense was not nearly as explosive with him. It was impotent at times despite getting wins. The defense was really leading him to those victories, even though he would dink and dunk a little bit. He's an athlete too. Maybe he could become a dual threat. Arguably has a better arm than Garrett Green, but Garrett Green's been more explosive, and maybe you could argue from camp, Nico made less mistakes, which is why some loved him, and Garrett Green's kind of that feast or famine. But off of this year, and we have the graphic up there on our socials, by the way, that Logan Carney put together for us on WVSN, that Garrett Green had a solid year overall. I mean, the numbers are there. You can watch it and eye test it and say, yeah, he tried to do too much. I've said it, but the numbers are there. It was a good year. I mean, in no way was he the worst starting quarterback in the country off of the numbers he put up. And he played in every game, including the Pitt game, despite leaving early, and then obviously did not play against Texas Tech. But, himself personally leading the team to 7-4, he does get credit for the Pitt win. And even if you want to go 7-3 or 6-3 and not count that game, okay. But still an overall solid year for Garrett Green. He's going to start next year. So if you're Nico, and I know his father and him aren't thrilled with the situation because he's not playing, but what are you going to do? You're not going to play him over Green with how Green's played most of the year. Again, being way more explosive than Nico was, even though Nico did enough to help you win when your defense plays well, and did win a game and really won 2. But Nico probably needs to transfer and probably go to a group of 5 school and try to get on the field if he wants to have a semblance of a career. I know him and Green are friends. They like everything. Nico's not in any way been a malcontent. From what I've heard, he's fine as a teammate. He did get in this year. Everyone loves him. He's laughing on the sidelines. You see it too. But if I'm advising Nico, he probably does need to transfer and get somewhere where he can freaking play. Because playing at a smaller school, even if it's a Troy and Neil Brown helps him get there on a wink, playing at Troy, for example, would be better for Nico than not playing at all and sitting on the bench almost an entire year again under Green. It's a 4-star kid. It would suck to have him recruited for West Virginia and then never really see anything out of it, because that would be the situation. But I can't imagine him staying. Like, why? I just can't imagine it. Yeah, Green took a huge jump. He did take a huge jump, and maybe another year in the system. Again, yeah, 100%. And this was the first year with Chad Scott. He obviously didn't have Chad Scott as his OC, even though he was there as a running game coordinator. That wasn't all Green was doing, of course. Sean Regan's been there a couple years. Neil Brown did call plays at the end of last season, even though the beginning was Graham Harrell. And obviously the year before, Neil Brown was very involved. So it's not like it was totally new for Green, but Chad Scott, new OC, Neil Brown taking it over again. Things he had to work on, things that were new, a full year doing it, coming off of an injury, and then still playing well. And then I think most importantly, Green has become the true leader of the Mountaineers. Okay, the fans even like watching him. He gives you that moxie, that almost Brett Favre attitude that there's going to be some mistakes here, but when it's great, it is really great. It's going to be fun to watch all the way through. It's entertaining as all heck, and you just want to win with him. That's the vibe of Garrett Green with the Mountaineers. And yeah, he'll be back. He'll want to come back. He'll be the starter, and he'll be the leader of the team, which I wouldn't have said 1 year ago. Anything else here? West Virginia does hang on. They do win the bizarre game that was the game to end the season at Baylor, 34-31, and they pull it off. Crawling out of there with a win, escaping disaster, and getting the 8th win of the season before the bowl. Man, a loss would have been bad no matter what happened earlier in that game. A loss would have been really, really bad. But they do win. And it really is what Houston should have been, but that was a loss for the Mountaineers. Just the fact that it's his alma mater makes me think he would consider it, I agree, not a smart career move. Anthony, I'm not going to sit here and argue about, what's in Neil Brown's mind. I've covered him for years. I know the guy somewhat. I certainly don't know what's in his mind at all. We're not like close friends by any means. I could see an attraction to your alma mater. I 100% think Kentucky might be the only program that would probably call him, and maybe that he would be interested in. That probably is a thing. I don't think Texas A&M is really going to look to him. They're going to want a flashier hire. They got a lot of money there, obviously, and it didn't work out with Jimbo. That seems like you're going down. Like Jimbo's won a national title. Kevin Sumlin had a 10-win season with Johnny Manziel, and you're going to go to Neil Brown. That doesn't seem to make sense. It's hard to see how the fan base will get excited off of that. They see how Neil Brown's treated on social media. They see this being his best year at West Virginia in year 5. I don't see it. Michigan State job has been filled. Oregon State is an absolute just catastrophe of a move with conference uncertainty and a lesser program with less money and worse recruiting, because you don't do much there on the West. You're basically getting like the 3rd or 4th chipper that USC and the others don't want. No, I mean, yeah, they won some games and it was a solid year, and it kind of sucks for that fan base to lose a guy who did this for them in the midst of the Pac-12 uncertainty. But that would just be stupid, honestly. And Kentucky probably would be too, because you're going to the SEC. I don't see how you're even winning 8 games there. The schedule is going to be tougher year in and year out in conference play, regardless of out of conference. That would be a big risk. Recruiting-wise, would be similar, though. It would be similar base, similar. So he can go recruit the same kids he's recruiting now there, and they play SEC national TV, but how often is Kentucky really on in comparison to all the other SEC teams that get on TV? They're obviously better than Vanderbilt here. They're not Vanderbilt, but it's like a once every 6 years they have an okay year that they think is great off an 8-win year, but not even really. And it's the SEC, and you're 3 or 4 teams that are going to always be dominant there with Alabama, Georgia, even Tennessee, Auburn usually, Florida down, but they're going to get back up quicker than you will, obviously. That's just not a better job. I mean, the new Big 12 does not have Oklahoma, does not have Texas. It will have Arizona, Utah, etc. But okay, Texas A&M announced, so that's gone too. Okay, that's why you're bringing up Kentucky probably with Stoops. That makes sense. So I'm obviously hosting this show and didn't see it and covering the Mountaineers. So that's gone, and that's kind of a sexy hire, but I could argue that's bizarre. But he's had some good moments, so I guess he's stepping up to it. Maybe you go to just a legit coach rather than try to swing for the fences and look at the resume of Jimbo, because that didn't work out when you looked at the resume of Jimbo with all the money and all the recruiting classes that were there. So then you're looking at the Kentucky job, and they may call. But number one, I don't think Neil Brown's concerned about that right now. Number two, I do not think it's a better job because of the SEC and how impossible it is to win there. And number three, it would kind of be funny, honestly, if Neil Brown would leave on his own, especially for a worse job historically in a harder conference after the fire he was just in. So wouldn't that be weird if West Virginia fans get rid of Neil Brown off an 8-win season and a better year because he chooses to leave rather than be fired? That would almost be a poetic harmony of hilarity, I got to tell you. But I don't see it as a better job. So he can do what he wants, but I don't see it as a better job. I'm going to close up shop here soon. I could see the thinking of Nico staying and finishing himself out as a starter junior and senior year, dude. But like, that is an incredible risk for Nico because you don't know what's going to come in transfer portal wise. They probably will look to that after Green is done. Some people are even confused about Green's eligibility. He maybe has 2 years more rather than just one, which bleeds you into just really the senior year. Nico is a 4-star recruit, and you're going to ask him to sit down for 2 years. This is not 20 years ago. There is not even a reason to do that because he could transfer at any moment. The windows are going to be there. Some group of 5 will be interested, maybe even freaking Kentucky if Brown would go there. Like, there are going to be opportunities for Nico probably at a lower level Power 5 or group of 5 level, maybe not immediately handed the starting job. He did win a game this year, but he's certainly been the backup, and the offense struggled at times with him. But to ask him to just sit down for a whole nother year, maybe more, that's a lot. It's a 4-star kid. Why should he do that? He's not from West Virginia. He's from Arizona. What does he owe the Mountaineers? They recruited him. He went there. He's done everything they've asked, but I wouldn't advise it. Doesn't make sense to me why he would do that. Even if he has one, I'll put it to you that way, Anthony. Even if he has one, I don't see, if I'm Nico, why I want to sit out a whole nother year next year when I probably for sure can play at least a group of 5. Playing is better than not playing if you're a kid that wants to go to the next level, even if you want NIL money. I mean, look at the connections that are now there. I mean, Ren Baker at North Texas, Neil Brown at from Troy still. They could probably get him to those places and help him out. They like him. But playing is better than not playing. So he's not playing now. Green's going to start next year. What are you doing if you're Nico? Anything else here, guys? Obviously went a little bit longer than I thought actually initially, because we took a while to get going on this show, opposite of West Virginia. West Virginia started out guns blazing. They were kicking butt in the first half, and then they really sucked in the second half, and they were real slow until the end, and they end up winning the game. Us here, we were, sluggish early on in the first half of this show. I had to kind of carry the load. We now have all you guys commenting all up and down. helping me out. We're playing great as a roster here. The whole team's involved. And we're going to end this strong. It's maybe where I want to leave it. The Mountaineers do win 34-31, though. They do get win number 8 on the year. They do have a bowl game coming up. And we will see what that bowl game is and where the chips fall. But there will be a bowl game no matter what. We'll keep tabs on Nia Brown and all of that with those Kentucky rumors that maybe you guys are just starting. We'll see if they're out there on social media. And yeah, that's an interesting situation, but it is not a better job in my eyes. And I think being the SEC with that program, the money goes to basketball. It does not go to football. I do not see that as a better job. I'll tell you right now. Historically, current money situation, conference situation, everything. Maybe you want to be in the SEC rather than the Big 12 in general, but I don't see how you win there. I do not see it being a better job, but he may want to do it because he's sick of a lot of what's going on with West Virginia, despite a better year and a turnaround. So we'll see how everyone views this. 8-4, the one bad loss to Houston. You blow a game to Oklahoma State, despite them being a good team, despite the early season loss to a really bad team or really bad loss against South Alabama. They end up in the Big 12 title game. Felt like we were going to lose tonight. Yeah. This felt like a game that West Virginia would have lost last year and that bad teams would definitely lose. But West Virginia, they're not a great team. They're at least a good team now. They were a bad team last year. They weren't even good the year before. You could argue about COVID. I would say at least they were good. They certainly weren't great then. And then the climbing fell off the mountain. No pun intended. Actually, it might have been. But they're at least a good team now. At least a good team. Not a great team. A great team would have had a 10-win season this year. A great team would have hung on to beat Oklahoma State and would keep that win, no matter how good Oklahoma State was. When you're leading in the fourth quarter, Olive Garden runs for 150 yards in the fourth quarter. You make that about 90 yards instead, and you probably win. So a great team would have beat Oklahoma State, would have hung on to beat Oklahoma State. They've been vulnerable this year, despite being good. And a great team, you bring that up, makes up for the Houston loss? Little bit. I mean, losing both Baylor and Houston would have been a catastrophe. That would have been disaster. They escaped disaster, as I said. It ends up being the result that Houston was not, and a better result for the Mountaineers, where they win despite a crazy game that shouldn't have been as crazy to a bad team. But Houston's an inexcusable bad loss that's still on the resume. Penn State, you were never going to win, and you would have covered the spread if it wasn't for them scoring in the final 6 seconds. So, say what you want about that. It's fair. Go ahead and stop them. But West Virginia played better than anybody would thought they would have in that game. They played better against Penn State than some conference teams that are similar programs. Maryland, for example, with a similar season to West Virginia, despite losing a lot at the end, they're similar kind of thought of in the Big Ten, even though now West Virginia will be higher up in the pecking order of the new Big 12, you would figure, than what they'll be in the Big Ten. And yeah, West Virginia is a better program than Maryland historically, last 20 years, 100%. But similar size, geographic region, I'll say that. And West Virginia played way better against Penn State than Maryland. Way better. So, and then Oklahoma, they should have played way better. They did lose. They got beat down. Maybe you're not mad about a beat down to Oklahoma as a top 15 team, despite them not being a national contender this year. And they have been vulnerable, but they're still freaking Oklahoma with 5 stars. And you're on the road. But West Virginia should have at least hung in that game, at least made that close. Like you lose by a touchdown and 10 points, back and forth game for a little bit, then Oklahoma pulls away. You don't feel as bad. You say, okay, they're just better. But to lose that way and get totally dominated, that's rough. But the Houston game, you can't excuse. Michael Hudson Clement is not talking about enough for his game today. Every time his number was called, he showed up and showed out today. All the same time, Neil Brown's play calling is garbage for another year. Neil Brown, I thought, honestly, had a better year play calling this year than people would have thought. He was aggressive a lot this year that I never dreamed he would have been as aggressive in. He sometimes gets in his head at times. I absolutely agree with that. Chad Scott keeps saying he likes Neil Brown being aggressive, but sometimes it doesn't make sense. But I think he's done a better play calling job than people give him credit for. Way better than he was 2 years ago, for sure. Way better than 2 years ago for Neil Brown. But yeah, a lot can be improved. It's not perfect by any means. There's times I scratch my head as well. And Hudson Clement, who was not on scholarship entering the season, earned a scholarship with a big game against an FCS team against Duquesne, has been a spark plug and a major contributor this year. He's been injured at times, did miss some time, but he should have had a game winner against Houston. The Hail Mary and the helmet coming off for Garrett Green and that penalty screwed all that up because that would have been a great story for Hudson Clement. off a game winner as a West Virginia product when Dana said he wasn't going to really recruit West Virginia kids. This game, Hudson Clement is who he goes to at the end again. Once again, 2 minutes left. They need to win. They shouldn't be losing. Once again, Hudson Clement thinks like maybe he's going to get a game winner again. It goes to Jaheim, but he did all the work to build that drive. So Hudson Clement, a great player, way better than anybody would have thought. And no one even really heard the name a year ago. And obviously, and he had a great high school career, obviously, we know, in West Virginia, but he was not heavily recruited at all. Earned his scholarship and then some. Jaheim White played down the stretch worth 2 wins. We sure are a third running back from overrated. We need a back in the portal. Not sure Donaldson's the back we were hoping for. Robert, I wrote about how Donaldson's been struggling this year. He had his games of 3.2 yards, 3 yards per carry, and 2.8 yards in 3 straight weeks, and I got killed for it. But I'm glad you're aware. C.J. Donaldson has been a little bit of a disappointment. He's had his moments. He's very, very athletic. He's very, very good. He's had his good games. He had 100 yards in games. The Brawl was a game that he really helped them win. That's a C.J. Donaldson win, 100%. Without him, they don't win that game. That was before Jaheim emerged. That was with Nico and Green hurt. The offense was not moving. CJ was the guy. Pitt cannot stop him even going back to last year. However, he's not been nearly as good as advertised. He wasn't anything special this year that he was not last year when emerging. When he's healthy, he's a beast. He's hard to tackle, but he doesn't always have a burst, and the yards per carry aren't always great. Jaheim looks like he's emerging as the top back. CJ sometimes is not hitting the hole hard. That's absolutely been said by coaches, by the way, as well as of criticism. When he's good, he's playing hard. He doesn't always do it. It does not appear. But he'll be back next year. He's young. And they're maybe a two-headed monster of thunder and lightning. That's what they're selling themselves on. So he obviously is a big part of the team still, but CJ may not be the guy that's the next Steve Slayton. Maybe that is Jaheim White. And they're two different running backs. CJ, a really big, bulky, size-driven running back, and Jaheim White, a smaller, statured, speed demon hiding behind the line and kind of, twitchy type running back. So the defense needs to be better as well. When the defense is healthy, that's a big part of it too. The defense has been a roller coaster ride this year. But at the end of the day, and I'm going to close up shop now, at the end of the day, the West Virginia Mountaineers got win number 8. It was not pretty. It was ugly. It was almost catastrophic for West Virginia in Waco to end a year. But nonetheless, the Mountaineers do, thanks to a game winner at the end, a game-winning touchdown, I might add, at the end. They pull it out, and West Virginia goes 8-4 in the regular season. They were predicted to be 4 wins at the most. They were said to be last in the Big 12. They end up in the top 5. They're going to get in a legitimate bowl game. They have a chance at 9 freaking wins in that bowl game, which would make this the best year for the Mountaineer program since Dana's 10-win season, his second 10-win season in 2016, a year that not many celebrate and kind of forget about. That was a 10-win year. That's his second after the Orange Bowl year as well. This would be the first 9+ since then. It cannot be 10, and maybe it should be with the Houston game added in there. There was a bad loss in the mixed. They did play a tough team out of conference in Penn State despite not playing Texas in conference. They did take advantage of a little down year for the Big 12 in comparison to last year with 5 ranked teams on the schedule that helped TCU. Whatever the case may be, they were said to be a 3 or 4 win team. They end up going 8-4. They have a chance at 9 in the bowl game. The bowl game will be something of note. It won't be just the toilet bowl. Neil Brown does show the 2023 class could be climbing somewhere. The freshmen are heavily involved. Zach Frazier is going to definitely get drafted. There were issues on defense. There were issues on offense at times. Fans had to have heart attacks, including this last win at Baylor. But at the end of the day, the Mountaineers are 8-4, and that's just a fact. So head over to WV Sports now for the rest of our coverage as this season wraps up, and now a bowl game is in front of the program. We'll see what the offseason holds for West Virginia now as the Mountaineers do win at Waco, hanging on and escaping disaster, 34-31. Final seconds of the game, touchdown pass, Garrett Green, Jaheim White, drive set up by Hudson Clement. Miraculous, amazing, and they played bad enough in the second half to make the fans off the wagon but they end up with the win, so they jump back on. And again, West Virginia wins it and is now 8-4 on the year. So the Mountaineers will finish 8-4. A team predicted to win 4 ends up with only 4 losses at 8-4, and now has a bowl game in front of them. Mountaineers beat Baylor 34-31, escaping disaster in Waco to end the year with win number 8.